Assalamu alaikum everyone, welcome to our channel. Today we will be discussing history of linguistics and the major tradition that played an important role in the development of linguistics. So let's begin. Okay, an outline of the history of linguistics. People everywhere talk about language, they have ideas about its nature, uses, origin, acquisition, structure, and so on. Here we are told that people universally talk about the language and they have some ideas regarding its nature, uses, origin, acquisition, and so on. So some of these notions are enshrined in mythology. Think for instance of the Tower of Babel story. In some sense, the things people say in belief about language could qualify as linguistics. They represent a body of knowledge and beliefs about language. ओके सो यहाँ पर हमें बताया गया है कि पीपल ऑलरेडी हैव आइडियाज रिगार्डिंग द लैंग्वेज। तो ये जो आइडियाज है इनमें से कुछ माइथोलॉजी से ली गई है एंड सम आर बेस्ड ऑन द एवरीडे बिलीव्स। सो हमें कहा गया है कि ये जो सारे आइडियाज है अबाउट द नेचर ऑफ लैंग्वेज, इट्स ओरिजिन एक्सेट्रा, वो सारी की सारी रिलेटेड है माइथोलॉजी से या फिर everyday belief say. But as we are using it, the term linguistic refers to a body of language that is structured in ways that characterize it as a science rather than mythology or everyday beliefs. बट नो हमें यहाँ पर बताया गया है कि हम लोग चूंकि लिंग्विस्टिक को एक एज अ साइंस स्टडी कर रहे हैं, सो इट इज़ नॉट बेस्ड ऑन माइथोलॉजी और एवरीडे बिलीव्स। लाइक हम इसको माइथोलॉजी पे बेस नहीं कर सकते। लैंग्वेज इज अ साइंस। Okay, so linguistics is thus a cultural phenomena, an activity practiced in some, certainly not all cultures. Like all cultural phenomena, it has a history which partly shapes it, including the questions it addresses and the methods it employs. For this reason, it is useful to know something about the development of the subject. Okay, so as we said that linguistic, it is a cultural phenomena, or cultural phenomena की तरह it has a history, and we need to understand that history in order to have idea about the development of this field or this subject. Now let's move on, which is okay. So we might refer to the beliefs about language shared by members of a community or culture as ethno-linguistic or folk linguistics. So यहाँ पर हमें ethno-linguistic की definition दी गई है. Like what is ethno-linguistic? So it is the beliefs about language shared by members of a community or culture. Like community के जो different members हैं वो जो common belief share करते हैं about the language, they are known as folk linguistic or ethno-linguistics. Okay, so let's start with the foundations in Antiquity. The earliest known linguistic tradition arose in Antiquity in societies with established tradition of writing in most cases. As we will see, these traditions arose in response to language change and the resulting impact on religious and legal domains. तो यहाँ पर हमें बताया गया है कि जो अर्लीस्ट लिंग्विस्टिक ट्रेडिशन थे वो हमारे पास एंटिक्विटी में या फिर एंशियंट टाइम्स में आए थे, एंड एट द सेम टाइम वी आर टोल्ड दैट in most cases, as we will see, these tradition arose in response to language change. Like जब भी language में change आया तो हमारे पास linguistic tradition आया, मतलब different traditions आए। हम लोग ये भी पढ़ेंगे कि what was its impact or how it affected the religious and legal domains. Now let's start the very first tradition, which is Babylonian tradition. Earliest linguistic texts written in cuneiform on clay tablets date almost 4,000 years before the present. In the early centuries of the second millennium BC in southern Mesopotamia, there arose a grammatical tradition that lasted for more than 2,500 years. Okay, so यहाँ पर हमें बताया गया है कि जो बहुत वो अर्ली लिंग्विस्टिक टेक्स्ट थे वो हमारे पास यूनिफॉर्म स्क्रिप्ट में थे and they were written on clay tablets. Yeah, it was almost 4,000 years ancient, पुराना था in the early centuries of the second millennium BC. So हमारे पास millennium means an anniversary of 1,000 years. So हमारे पास from 2000 to 1000 से लेकर इनके बीच में जो टाइम है उनको हम second millennium BC क्या था, origin कौन सा था, वो था मेसोपोटामिया, एंड एक ग्रामेटिकल ट्रेडिशन आया था हमारे पास और उसकी ड्यूरेशन थी 2500 years. The linguistic texts from the earliest part of the tradition were list of noun in Sumerian, a language isolate that is a language with no known genetic relatives, the language of religious and legal text. So अब हमें यहाँ पर सुमेरियन लैंग्वेज के बारे में बताया गया है कि एट दैट टाइम हमारे पास जस्ट कुछ नाउन्स थे इस सुमेरियन लैंग्वेज में, और ये लैंग्वेज हमारे पास सिर्फ रिलीजियस एंड लीगल टेक्स्ट के लिए यूज होती थी एंड इट हैड नो रिलेटिव लैंग्वेज, मतलब इसके उस टाइम पे हमारे पास कोई दूसरी लैंग्वेज नहीं थी जिसे हम कहें कि दिस लैंग्वेज हैज बीन इवॉल्व फ्रॉम द parent language or any relative language. Sumerian was being replaced in everyday speech by a very different and unrelated language, Akkadian. Associated, it remained, however, a prestigious language and continued to be used in religious and legal contexts. So we are told that Sumerian, as it was a language of religious and legal text, means कि उसमें इस religion में just religion or legal text ही present थे and it was not related to the everyday life. So a new language came for the everyday life which was named as Akkadian language or like when Akkadian language came for the everyday purpose language started using उसके बावजूद भी जो Sumerian language थी it remained however a prestigious language like दूसरी language आई but still it was Sumerian language was a prestigious language and continued to be used in religious and legal texts और still वो religious and legal purposes के लिए use होती थी. It therefore had to be taught as a foreign language and to facilitate this information about Sumerian was recorded in writing. So जब हमारे पास अब Akkadian language आ गई है and people started speaking in that language, Sumerian language it became a foreign language and now there was a need. मतलब कि Sumerian language को पढ़ाने के लिए एक need पेश आई and it was taught as a foreign language. Over the centuries, the list became standardized and the Sumerian words were provided with Akkadian translation. तो हमारे पास with the passage of time list जो कि हमारे पास Sumerian language में noun के जो list थे वो एक standard words बन गए थे अब हमारे पास and the Sumerian words were provided with Akkadian translation और जितने भी Sumerian words थे तो उसको Akkadian language में translate करना start किया गया. And then ultimately texts emerged that give Akkadian equivalents for not just single words but for entire paradigms of varying form of words. One text, for instance, has 227 different forms of the verb gar to place. Okay, so यहाँ पर हमें बताया गया है कि when like the people started translating the words, the Sumerian words into Akkadian, तो उस टाइम पे हमारे पास like the Sumerian language, it didn't have only one meaning in the Sumerian language. Like इसकी बहुत ज़्यादा मीनिंग आ रही थी ट्रांसलेशन करते वक्त इन द Akkadian language. Gar की like gar is a Sumerian word and it has 227 different form of verb to place in the Akkadian language. Like it means to place in the Akkadian language. It is a meaning. Okay, so now let's start with the Hindu tradition, like how it started. तो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल जब हमारे पास चेंजेस इन संस्कृत लैंग्वेज में आई हमारे पास चेंज आया तो हिंदू ट्रेडिशन भी स्टार्ट हुआ और ये हमारे पास इसका ओरिजिन फर्स्ट मिलीनियम बीसी में है और इट वाज अ सेक्रेड लैंग्वेज संस्कृत वाज अ सेक्रेड लैंग्वेज ऑफ रिलीजियस टेक्स्ट which ritual required the exact verbal performance of the religious text, and a grammatical tradition emerged that set out rules for the ancient language. अब हमें यहाँ पर rituals का रोल बताया गया है कि like what role the rituals played. So ritual required exact verbal performance of the religious text. Like तो प्रॉब्लम यहाँ पर आती है कि जो रिचुअल्स थे या फिर जो रिलीजियस टेक्स्ट था इट नीडेड अ वर्बल परफॉर्मेंस लाइक इसको वर्बली भी प्रेजेंट करना था एंड फॉर दैट अ ग्रामेटिकल ट्रेडिशन इट इमर्ज लाइक हमारे पास एक ग्रामेटिकल ट्रेडिशन आया फॉर द वर्बल परफॉर्मेंस एंड दैट सेट आउट रूल्स फॉर द एंशियंट लैंग्वेज और साथ में हमें कुछ रूल्स दिए गए एंड द बेस्ट नोन ग्रामेरियन फ्रॉम दिस ट्रेडिशन इज Panini whose grammar covered phonetics, including differences between words pronounced in isolation and in connected speech and morphology. Grammatical tradition में जो best known grammarian था वो हमारे पास Panini था. Panini he was one of the prominent figure in this tradition and he worked on the phonetics like उसने phonetics पे भी काम किया and साथ ही साथ में उसने morphology पे भी काम किया. Panini's grammar was expressed largely in the form of rules of word formation, sometimes of a high degree of abstraction. The Hindu tradition of linguistics far surpassed anything done in Europe for a very long time. So Panini का जो grammar था उसने हमारे पास word formation के like as he has worked on the phonetics and the morphology. So morphology के लिए या फिर word formation के लिए he has given some rules और these जो rules थे they were like more related to the abstract words were abstract. So the Hindu tradition of linguistics far surpassed anything done in Europe for a very long time, which work lasted for a long period of time. Then comes Greek linguistics. It's another tradition. Okay, so the Greek tradition of linguistics developed slightly later than the Hindu tradition. हमारे पास Hindu tradition के बाद Greek tradition भी start हुआ and also initially in response to linguistic change necessitating explanation of the language of Homer epic. Like as we have said, हमारे पास ये जो ट्रेडिशन आए they were because of the change in language. उसमें लैंग्वेज में चेंज आया तो हमारे पास एक ट्रेडिशन स्टार्ट हुआ। होमर्स एपिक में जो लैंग्वेज यूज हुई थी तो उसको उसके एक्सप्लेनेशन के लिए हमारे पास ये ग्रीक ट्रेडिशन स्टार्ट हुआ एज इन अदर एरियाज ऑफ इंटेलेक्चुअल endeavor philosophical and theoretical question about language were also investigated. हुआ होमर्स एपिक के लैंग्वेज को स्टडी करना स्टार्ट किया तो लोगों ने फिलोसॉफिकल एंड थ्योरेटिकल क्वेश्चन अबाउट लैंग्वेज लाइक इस चीज में ही इन लोगों ने इंटरेस्ट लेना स्टार्ट कर दिया। थीम्स ऑफ पे जो ग्रीक ट्रेडिशन में स्टडी किए गए थे उनमें से फर्स्ट वन था द ओरिजिन ऑफ लैंग्वेज पार्ट्स ऑफ स्पीच सिस्टम। सो ये हमारे पास दो पॉइंट्स हुए द रिलेशन बिटवीन लैंग्वेज एंड थॉट स्टडी किया लाइक मीनिंग को स्टडी किया गया एंड द relation between the two aspects of word science, whether form and meaning are connected by nature or purely by convention. The arbitrary or natural relation between the meaning को भी study किया गया like the natural meaning means कि हम लोगों ने बहुत सी different चीजों को names दे दिए हैं language में but it has no natural connection between the meaning and the object. या फिर it is the meaning given by the convention. Like we have given the names to it and they are temporary or arbitrary. So Plato's Cratylus represents Socrates arguing for original nature connection that was subsequently obscured by convention. So Plato हमें बताता है कि like Socrates he wanted to support the idea of the natural meaning. Like Cratylus हमारे पास ये एक प्लाटो का डायलॉग था Aristotle by contrast favored convention over nature. जबकि Aristotle he was in favor of the meaning given by convention or the arbitrary meaning over nature. The first surviving grammar of European language is a short description of Greek by Crates Techni Grammatica dating about 100 BC. This work treated phonetics and morphology, including parts of speech, and had considerable influence over later descriptive grammars. Greek syntax was first described a couple of centuries later by Dioscorus. जो फर्स्ट सर्वाइविंग ग्रामर है वो है हमारे पास ग्रीक लैंग्वेज का जिस पे क्रेक्स ने काम किया था एंड इट्स हिज वर्क इज टेक्निक ग्रामेटिका। क्रेक्स ने जो काम किया था इट कवर्ड फोनेटिक्स मॉर्फोलॉजी एंड also he has worked on the descriptive grammar. So Greek syntax like he has worked on Greek phonetics and morphology but he had not worked on the Greek syntax which was later done by Apollonius Discolus. Apollonius ने फिर Greek syntax पे later on काम किया है। Then comes the Roman tradition. So Roman linguistics continues studying the themes of interest to Greek linguistics and like the other ancient tradition was prompted by changes in the spoken language. The primary interest was in morphology, particularly parts of speech and the forms of noun and verb. Syntax was largely ignored. So जो हमारे पास अभी रोमन लिंग्विस्टिक्स है तो उन्होंने सेंट मीन्स को स्टडी किया जैसे कि हमने अभी ग्रीक लिंग्विस्टिक्स में कहा है लाइक दे स्टडी फोनेटिक्स एंड मॉर्फोलॉजी। सेंटिक्स को टोटली इग्नोर कर दिया जस्ट लाइक इन ग्रीक ट्रेडिशन। नोटेबल among रोमन लिंग्विस्ट वॉज वेरू क्योंकि रोमन लिंग्विस्ट में नोटेबल फिगर हमारे पास वेरू है और उसने एक लैटिन के ग्रामर पे काम किया था एंड ही हैज गिवन अ मल्टी वॉल्यूम ऑफ ग्रामर ऑफ लैटिन ऑफ विच ओनली अबाउट अ क्वार्टर हैज सर्वाइव्ड। लाइक बहुत ही कम हिस्सा उसके वर्क का बचा है and it has survived. Later grammars of Donatus and Priscan were highly influential in the Middle Ages. Later on जो कि हमारे पास prominent figures थे वो थे Donatus and Priscan जिन्होंने इस grammar of Latin पे काम किया था. Arabic and Hebrew tradition. The Greek grammatical tradition had a strong influence on the Arabic tradition. हमारे पास जो अब ये Arabic tradition है, it was influenced by the Greek grammatical tradition, which also focuses on morphology. The tradition was also characterized by accurate phonetic description. The पास जो कि Arabic tradition आया, so it was focused on morphology and accurate phonetic description, and its beginning are generally considered to be in the 7th century AD. Normally, like people say that it started in the 7th century AD with the work of Abu al-Aswad al-Duali, like when he started work on the Arabic language, so this tradition started. The Hebrew tradition, the Arabic tradition served in turn as a major influence on the Hebrew tradition. Like अब जो हमारे पास Arabic tradition है, it had a great influence on the Hebrew tradition which began slightly later and in about the 9th century, like in 7th century the Arabic tradition started and in 9th century the Hebrew tradition started. Sadia bin Joseph al-Fayyumi produced the first grammar and dictionary of Hebrew, like who was an important figure who has given the grammar and dictionary of Hebrew for the first time, and his name was Al-Fayoumi. The Hebrew grammatical tradition reached its peak in the 13th century with David Kinley's work, which subsequently had a strong impact on European linguistics. So, जो कि later on इस पर डेविड किन्ही ने काम किया and his work has a major impact on the European linguistics. So with that, the traditions comes to an end, and in the next video, we will start from the Middle Ages in the Europe. Thank you for watching.